Now that we have our app live on Heroku, in this video, we're going to go through a new feature workflow. So we're going to be making some changes to an existing component. Then we're going to go through the process of making sure those changes work, they're tested, and they get deployed. Once we go through this, you're going to see what it takes to build out a feature end to end, and it's going to be your job to do that next. For now, though, the thing we're going to focus on is the expense list item component. So I'm going to shut down all of the open files, and the file that we're going to crack open is in the source components folder. We're going to crack open expense list item, and if we are going to be making some changes to this file, it's a good idea to crack open its companion test file as well. Now I'm going to be using some keyboard shortcuts here. If you go to the Go dropdown, there is Go to File. I recommend noting that keyboard shortcut. It's going to make it really easy to open files by file name. I'm going to use that, Command P for me. I'm going to search for expense list item. Right here I have the test file. I'm going to crack that open too. Luckily for us, the test for this component is pretty simple. We just have a single snapshot test, making sure things show up correctly. The goal here is to focus on not actually adding styles to the application, but on at least formatting the data correctly. So we're going to focus on formatting the currency. Right now, we just dump the number of cents to the screen, and we're also going to focus on formatting created at. We're going to actually output a human readable date. Once we have those two changes in place, we will test, commit, and deploy. Before we make any changes, let's go ahead and boot up the necessary processes over here. For the first tab, I'm going to use yarn run dev server to boot up the development server so we can actually view our application. And in the second tab, I'm going to go ahead and boot up that test suite, running yarn test. I am also going to use two hyphens to pass some arguments down to Jest. I'm going to pass down -- watch to make sure the test suite stays up and reruns when changes are actually made. Now, as we do start to integrate Git and other things into our project, we're going to notice that the behavior is slightly different. Right here, no tests found related to files changed since last commit. So it's actually not rerunning the test suite for this reason. We can force it to automatically rerun if we want by hitting the A key. It'll go through the process of running all of the test cases. As we do make changes, obviously it will automatically restart and show us the output when those test cases rerun. Now that we have both of these up, let's start making some changes to the actual code. And I'm going to kick things off by just restructuring. I'm going to take the paragraph tags, move them onto their own lines, and I'm also going to take amount and created at and move those onto their own lines as well. Once we have this in place, we're going to focus on formatting created at with moment. I'm going to import moment up above. I'm going to grab it from moment, and then we're going to use it. Now we already know what it takes to make a moment instance when we have a timestamp. All we do is we call moment, but instead of passing in no arguments and starting at the current point in time, we pass in the timestamp. In this case, I pass in the created at value. From here, we can use format, which we also explored. Now, if we just call format with no arguments, we're going to get a really long human readable date, but it's not exactly the nicest looking one. I'm going to go ahead and switch that up by providing specific patterns. The only pieces of the date I really want to show are the month, the day of the month, and the year. Things like the hours, minutes, and seconds I really don't care about because we don't want the user actually pick those when they are creating or editing expenses. So we're just going to go down to the day of the month as the most specific thing we show. Now, I don't expect anyone to memorize the format arguments. Sometimes you can forget what options you have. It's always nice to pull those up in the documentation. So if we do go over to Google, we can head over to momentjs.com. We can then go over to the docs page. We are looking for the display section. And if you remember, this is where we can find all of the various patterns we can use. For month, I'm going to use 4 M's. That gives me the full spelled out month. For day, I'm going to use DO, giving me first and second as opposed to 1 and 2. And finally, for year, I'm going to go with the 4-digit year. So that would be 4 uppercase Y's. Let's go ahead and integrate all of this into the format call. Right here, I'll start off with the month, 4 uppercase M's. Then I'm going to add a space between the month and the day, DO. I'll add a comma space between the day and the year, and right here, 4 uppercase Y's. Now at this point in time, if we go ahead and save the expense list item component, we can go over to the test suite. It is going to rerun, and we're going to see that this time around, we do have a failing test. Up above, should render expense list item correctly is failing. The old snapshot is not matching the new one right here. We used to see 0. Now we're seeing the formatted date, December 31st, 1969. So this is correct. This change obviously causes the failure of the test case, but we can go ahead and accept that as the new snapshot by hitting the U key. I'm going to press that. It is going to move through the test suite one more time. Right here, we can see our test case was updated, and we can see we are now back to a completely passing test suite. Next up, we're going to go ahead and format amount to look a little more like currency as opposed to just being a really long random number. Now, we're going to be using a library that's going to make it very easy to format currency. Just like we used Moment to make date formatting easy, we're going to use a library called Numeral.js to make currency formatting easy. Could we go ahead and build our own currency formatter library? Sure, but there's already good ones that have been battle tested in the real world, so it's a better idea to just use those. Now, the one we're going to be using is Numeral.js. We can find that by heading over to the browser, going to Numeral. JS.com. This is where we can find the documentation as well as installation instructions. And if we scroll down, it's actually pretty similar to Moment. We call numeral with a number, and then we have access to various methods on that numeral instance to do stuff, just like we call format on our Moment instance. The one we're looking for down below is the format method. This allows us to format our numbers. Here we are formatting regular numbers. We are not doing anything related to currency. And we have some pretty interesting examples, like taking a number in the millions and just outputting 1.2 million or 1K. Down below, we have currency. There is quite a few different ways we can do this, and we're going to go with the first approach, which is the most common formatting. Right here, we take this number, we use this format pattern, and the end result is this string. We got our comma separators, we have our decimals, we do have the $sign. Let's go ahead and actually set this up. The first thing we do need to do is install Numeral.js. We're going to get that done over inside of the terminal. I will shut down the first tab where I have the dev server. I'll use yarn add to add this. It is Numeral. Now, do we need this on Heroku? Sure, this is not something we just need locally. Heroku is going to need this if it's going to be running Webpack for us. So I'm not going to use the dev flag. The version is at, right here, 2.0.6. Now we can go ahead and actually install this one and use it. Once the installation is done, I'm just going to restart the dev server before switching over to the editor. All right, dev server is up and running once again, so let's go ahead and actually use it. Over here, I'm going to import numeral from the numeral library, which we just installed. Then we're going to go ahead and actually use it. So I'm going to remove amount. I'm going to call numeral. I'm going to pass the amount in, getting my numeral instance. Now I need to actually call format with the pattern I want to use. Now we already determined the pattern that we're going to be using. It is the pattern right here. I can copy the $sign all the way to the trailing 0. Head over here and paste it in, and this should give us exactly what we want. I can go ahead and save expense list item. Over inside of the terminal, I can check out my test cases. Once again, we have a failing test case, but this is okay. Now you'll notice one thing, we have 195 and we're getting $195. That's actually not what we want. It should have been $1.95. So we can see our test case caught an issue. All we need to do over here is divide our number by 100 to convert it from cents to decimals. Then we can resave things, rerun the test suite. Here we do have the expected result, so we can use U to accept the changes to the snapshot. I'm going to update those changes, the test suite reruns, and right here we can see that everything is still passing using the numeral library, which we just installed. Now, if you are somewhere else in the world where you have a different currency symbol or you have different delimitors for your thousandths or your decimals, the numeral library does allow you to configure all of that. If you head back over to the browser and you scroll down to the locales section, this shows you how you can set all of that up. So right here, we register a new locale, we set up our delimiters, our abbreviations, we even set up the way we can convert the currency symbols, and then all we do is we use it. We set numeral.locale equal to FR, which we set up here, and from there on out, all of the numeral calls will use the data you provided here. So you can really customize it to fit the needs of you and your current location. Now that we have this in place, though, we are all done with the development side of things. And before I do go any further, even though I do have the test cases up and running, I am going to just check this out over in the dev server. Over here, I'm going to give things a refresh. I'm going to add a new expense. Let's go ahead and create one with a dummy description and an amount. I'm going to go with 3,444.1. So this should be 10 cents. Let's see if everything gets converted correctly. I'm going to add the expense. Right over here, I do get 3,444 with 10 cents tossed on the end. So now that everything is working, we can go ahead and actually make the commit. I'm going to shut down the dev server, use clear, run git status to get a quick overview of what I've changed. Right here, we have a few changes. I have a change to my snapshot file. I have a change to the expense list item file, package.json, yarn.lack. All of this is expected, so we can go ahead and make that commit using git commit with the A flag, since we only have modified changes. Then I'm going to go ahead and use the M flag to provide the message. Setup, formatting for amount, and created at. Perfect. So now that we have this in place, we can go ahead and make the commit and push up to GitHub with git push. Once it's up there, we will deploy to Heroku by taking our code and pushing it up. Git push Heroku master. Once the code is up on the Heroku servers, it is going to take the latest changes, the changes we just committed, and it's going to redeploy the application. And to wrap this video up, we're just going to wait for the deployment to finish, and then we're going to make sure it actually works over on the live version. I'm going to cut to when the deployment process is done, since it is going to take about a minute. I'll see you in a couple of seconds. All right, welcome back. Everything did seem to go well, and we can make sure it went well by pulling up the application in the browser. I'm going to head over to Chrome. I'm going to pull up the tab for the actual Heroku app, and we're just going to test things out. I'll crack open the console and put that at the bottom. Refresh the page, and right here, everything is at least working. Let's go ahead and add an expense and make sure everything gets formatted. I'm going to add a dummy description and an amount. Let's go ahead and use $1,035. So 1,000,035 dot, and I'll go with 0 cents. I'll change the date to August 2nd. I'll add the expense, and right here we can see everything is working really well. We have our $1,035 formatted correctly. We have August 2nd, 2017 showing up. So that is the entire development lifecycle from beginning to end when we're actually pushing up to GitHub and deploying to Heroku with test cases integrated. In the next several videos, you're going to be going through a similar process, but for a much more complex feature. So I'm going to give you a pretty open-ended set of things to do, and it's going to be your job to actually go off and do them. I am super excited to get to that, to get you writing some code on your own. So let's go ahead and jump over there.